Good morning, welcome back. In the last video, I spoke about the checklist that I give to my learners when they write their pieces. So this checklist I actually got from some of the grade 10 to 12 assignments that the Department of Education would send. So I think that this is a very good checklist that actually encapsulates everything that needs to be there. So the first little thingy is to actually start every sentence with the capital letter. There is a full stop at the end of every sentence. There isn't a capital letter after a comma, obviously excluding names. There's always a verb in the second position in the sentence. If there is a second verb, it comes at the end of the sentence. So you have to follow Stompie always. And you need to test every sentence. This is all part of your editing process. Okay, you need to fit the rules for voegwoorde in group 1, 2, and 3. I'll do another little video on how to do that. Voegwoorde or conjunctions. Now you get three different groups. Each group has its own rule. Once again, I sent a work package home with my students. They've got all that information. It was discussed in class, but I think I should do a video anyway on that. There are commas between two verbs and before voegwoorde, before conjunctions. There's always a double negative. So if you are using nie, remember at the end of the sentence there must also be a nie. You need to stick to one time period. So in other words, if you are doing it in the present tense, teenwoordige tyd, you are only using the present tense. If you are using past tense, verlede tyd, you are only using past tense. When you use teenwoordige tyd, you use as. Wanneer, nou, dan. Okay, when you are using verlede tyd, you are using toe. You do not use any English words. No words are left out because that makes it unreadable for the marker. And also, when you are using English words, it makes it unreadable for the marker. I will show you the rubric that we mark on now. Words of which I'm not certain of the spelling, I have circled so that I can look it up. This is especially important when you are doing a formal assessment task that you're going to hand in class, because you have got the time to look for these words. The introduction sentence of the paragraph is the main thought. This is the thought that everything else goes off of. So each sentence has its own thought. All the sentences in the paragraph keeps in contact with that main thought. So in other words, you're not going to talk about poppies in the field and then suddenly talk about sunflowers in the field. You are going to talk about one flower and their properties and what makes them nice. And then in the next paragraph, you are going to talk about the other flower, for example. There is a line left between every paragraph. Why? It makes it easier for the marker to read, so that our eyes don't get tired. And also, it makes it easier for your audience to read. It doesn't matter who it is. There is no one on earth who's going to read a 1,000-word essay if there's no spaces left open. There's an interesting introduction, which makes the reader want to read further. The conclusion paragraph makes everything make sense. So it ties in to everything that you've said. Okay, all it is it's closing what you've said. So maybe you want to remind everyone about what was said already, but you don't put any extra information in that conjunction. That conclusion. Okay, you need to count your words and write it underneath the essay or the book review or whatever it is that you have written. And you also need to have a title and a date above the final product. Okay? All of these things will help you get a good mark. So what my learners have been taught to do is they have to actually tick it off as they go along during their editing process. When we mark things, this is how we mark them. So obviously this is not really for you to know, but this is for the markers to know. All right. So that is just quickly what the checklist is that I was talking about. Now I'm also going to show you the rubric that we make use of to explain a little bit better what it is that we are looking for. All right, so if I open up over here, right, so over here I've got an assessment rubric for a long transactional text. This would be for 30 marks, and this is going to tie in with what I was saying about making sure that you haven't got any English words or whatever. So for your content planning and format, you can get 18 marks out of 30. Okay, so for 15 to 18 marks, your response has to be outstanding, above expectations. You have to have a good knowledge of the format and the characteristics of the text, and you need to keep in focus of what you are actually talking about. Your ideas must be intelligent, mature, properly explained with detail, which supports the the topic, and you need to have all the content and everything. It needs to hang together, and the format needs to be fitting and accurate. If you don't have any of those things, you would get 0 to 4 marks for that. So that would say that you show no knowledge of the type of text and of the characteristics of the text. Your meaning is unclear, onduidelik, unclear, and it doesn't even like follow the topic. It will say, and just because of this, you will have no detail to support the topic. You will have no balance, and you will not be able to fit the rules of the format. Okay, so now let's talk about the language style and editing. So to get 10 to 12, you would need to have woordeskat or vocabulary that is meant or that is accurate for that audience, gehoor, and for the context of what you're talking about. You would need accurate and good grammar, which is accurately constructed, which follows the Stompie rule, and which is evidently or mostly without any mistakes. However, if you do not, or if you leave English words in, or if your essay is mostly English words, it means that you don't understand what the topic is about. Your grammar will be completely wrong. You will not have any vocabulary that you can use, because unfortunately when we mark essays or whatever in Afrikaans, we have to pretend that we don't understand English. So if there's an English word, I mark it wrong, I cross it out completely, and then I will only have an essay with N and A in it, for example. So it's very important to remember those things, okay? And that goes for anything. Over here is our essay one, which is a lot more detailed, but it basically talks about the same thing. And over here is the short transactional texts. And once again, it's the same thing. So those are just some hints and tips for writing your essays. And it's just the little checklist that I was talking about. Please remember to do these things, because if you don't, you will just get a bad mark. And that is why it is there. Those checklists are there to help you. It's not to make your work more. It's just to ensure that you know what you are doing. All right. Thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. I hope that you have a wonderful day further.